In this video, why you should never fly before 8 a.m. Now I know that flights often operate at very weird hours. You go on Google Flights, you go on Skyscanner, and you're given all these flight opportunities for 6:30 in the morning or midnight, and you're like, why the hell are there no normal hours? Like, why can't I just fly at 3 in the afternoon? Now, there's a lot of reasons for this, but the main reason is because it's simply more economical or cheaper to fly at 6:30 a.m. or at 2 in the morning or midnight or whatever it is. Right? Because airports are busy all day, the tarmac, the gates, and there's only a limited number of gates, there's only a limited number of tarmac space, and so it's most busy in the middle of the day. Those tarmacs are super busy and congested at noon, at 2 p.m., 4 p.m., 6 p.m., etc. And for that reason, flights that operate at those peak occupancy times at noon, 2 p.m., 3 p.m., etc., those are more expensive flights because they need to be able to incentivize people to fly off peak hours, to fly off hours, to fly at weird times of the day and night, right? And so lots of people, I don't know why, but they always do, when they do studies, they show that people always look for every way to save 50 or $100 on flights by any number of things, by choosing a bad seat or flying at a weird hour or choosing a discount airline or not getting baggage. And I truly believe that a flight is just not the place to save $100. Either work harder to make $100 somewhere else, or if you got to save $100, do it somewhere else. Like buy less clothes, or I don't know, go to the bar less or something. But flights is really not the place to cheap out, because the difference is very palpable. It's very obvious. And so the idea of this video is why you should never fly before 8 a.m. This is a policy that I have, and I really stick to it. I really stick to it because even just recently, a friend came to visit me, and they took a flight that was like 5:30 in the morning, and they took a 5:30 in the morning flight, and by the time they arrived in my city, and by the time we got to meet up, they were like totally haggard. They were tired. They were cranky. They were smelling bad. All the bad things that happen from flying and from travel, right? You don't feel right. Your body's all achy and all this stuff. And honestly, I think this is more due to the hour that they're flying than anything. So let me explain. When you fly at 5:30 in the morning, 6 in the morning, you got to be at the airport maybe an hour and a half early, 2 hours early. And so you got to be at the airport at, let's just say the flight's at 6, you got to be at the airport at like 4:30 in the morning. And if you have to be at the airport at 4:30 in the morning, you got to be up at like 3:30 in the morning to, even if your bag's already packed, just to maybe take a quick shower, maybe get a coffee, maybe pack one or two last minute emergency things. Obviously, you need to, kind of get up a bit early and then, travel to the airport somehow. And so you have to get up at like 3 in the morning. And in order to do that, when you go to bed, you're just, by definition, only going to get like 3-4 hours of sleep. And it's also not 3-4 hours of normal sleep. It's going to be 3-4 hours of barely sleep. You're probably not going to sleep at all because you're kind of wired, because you're like, oh my God, tomorrow I'm going to Mexico. Oh my God, tomorrow I'm going to Italy. And you barely get any sleep really, because you're thinking about the trip, you're thinking about the luggage, you're thinking about the flight. And so you don't get it's not a normal in bed by 11, in bed by midnight by midnight type of night, right? It's just not you probably sleep 2 hours if you're lucky. And so maybe you think you're going to get 5 hours of sleep. You think like, oh, okay, I'll be in bed by 11. I'll wake up at 4 a.m. You think you're going to get 5 hours. You'd be lucky if you got 2 hours of sleep, right? And then so you get barely any sleep. You arrive at the airport. It's never easy. It's never easy to fly. And you're doing it on low sleep, you know. And by the time you get to your destination, you're all screwed up and you're all cranky and achy and hungry and this and that, right? And this was all largely avoidable by just flying a bit later. So this is why I don't fly before 8 a.m. I have a hard time sleeping. I don't get a full night's sleep. And it's just not worth it, because why are you doing this? You're basically doing it because the flight was $80 cheaper. Is that really worth saving $80 to not get a full night's sleep, to basically ruin your day by, being cranky and not being at full capacity in terms of your work and cognitive abilities? It's not worth it. Like, just pay the normal price for the normal ticket. If you can't afford to fly at noon, you can't afford that flight. I'm sorry. If you can only afford the 6 a.m. flight, you can't afford to fly, bro. You need to be flying after 8 a.m. every single time. Even 8 a.m. is like quite early, because that means you got to be at the airport at like 6, you got to be up at 5. Like, even 8 a.m. is very early. And so for that reason, I've made it a rule. I've made this mistake many times, maybe like certain airlines, certain flights, certain routes only fly at certain times. If that flight only exists at 6 a.m., that's just not going to be really an option for me. I'm just not going to do it. I'm going to choose something else. I'm going to choose a different route or a different destination, or maybe a different week or a different day to travel, something so that I don't have to fly at 6 a.m. Like, seriously, it's that big a deal. Now, I know some people will say, oh, I like flying at 6 a.m. because the airport's quiet and there's no lines and I breeze through security. And I get that. But and that is a pro, but I really don't think that pro outweighs the cons of ruining your sleep and so forth. And my real answer to that is, you should have global entry. You should have TSA pre-check. You should have a Nexus card if you're Canadian, so that you're breezing through security anyway, so that when you take a noon flight, a 2 p.m. flight, you're not stuck in a huge line. So you have global entry, and also you're not going to check a bag. I'll make a dedicated video on not checking a bag as well. Do not check a bag, because if you do not check a bag, you get to skip that whole check-in at the counter in most cases, and you can go straight to security. And obviously, if you're flying at like 6:30 a.m., there's not too much of a line at the counter. I get that. And obviously, I get that if you're flying at noon or 2 p.m., there's a gigantic line at the counter. There's literally probably an hour and a half line at the counter every day when you're flying at noon or 2 p.m. And I get that. But if you have global entry and you don't check a bag and you go straight to security, so what? Maybe the security line's like kind of bigger, but ideally if you have global entry, you're going into the global entry security line as well, which should be faster. But even if you have to go into the normal security line, it's just a security line. It's like almost always less than an hour, usually less than 20 minutes, right? So as long as you don't have to go to the counter, you're good. Because going to the counter is really what takes the time. So if for some reason you absolutely have to go to the counter, either because you have to check a bag or whatever, maybe that's a reason to fly at 6:30 in the morning. But if you're confident that you can skip the counter because you check into your flight on your mobile app so that you're already checked in. You already have your QR code before you even arrive at the airport. If you have global entry, you have your QR code, you have your ticket, you have your assigned seat, you're going straight to security. You're good. There's no real reason for you to take a 6 a.m. flight. You can do a midday flight and you should be fine. It's really not that bad. And I would actually even argue that I would rather take a 2 p.m. flight and wait an hour to get through security than to take a 6:30 a.m. flight and breeze through security in 5 minutes. Does that make sense? I think that's worth repeating because I truly believe that. I would rather show up at the airport at 2 p.m., have a 2 p.m. flight, and wait an hour to get through security. I would rather that than have a 6:30 flight with no security and breeze through security. The reason why is obviously nobody wants to wait an hour in line, but I'd rather be fully rested, 8 hours of sleep, fully rested, get there, and when you're waiting in line in security, you can still be on your phone. Like they still have, data connections in the airport. And so I can be productive. I can write tweets. I can respond to emails. I can do things on my phone and I can be somewhat productive. I'm listening to music. It's really not that bad. So I'd rather sleep normal and wait an hour in line and have 1 hour of semi-productivity than to breeze through security at 6:30 in the morning, but I'm on, 3 hours of sleep. Does that make sense? I think most people would agree with me on that. So a couple main points here. I think we've, hammered home the idea that you should always be flying after 8 a.m. in order to sleep well, and, you should be willing to pay a little bit more extra to do that. You should be willing to pay an extra $100 to sleep well and not have a weird flight. And then the second point is obviously that you should have global entry and that you should do carry-on only and these other things such that you don't have to check in at the counter and you can go straight to security. So I guess that's a side point. Makes sense? So that's why I do not fly before 8 a.m. And all my friends and family, I tell them, hey, when you book your flight, do not book some weird random morning flight. Do not show up in my adopted country all haggard and tired. I want you to show up ready to go. When you show up in Mexico, when you show up wherever I'm at, you need to be ready to go. I don't want to have you show up looking like a zombie, being like, yeah, man, I only got like 3 hours of sleep, and so I just want to take a chill day, a break day. I don't take break days. I don't take a day off. And I'm sure as hell not taking a day off because I only slept 3 hours because I cheaped out to save $80 on a ticket. Does that make sense? So you got to be high performance, highly performant every single day, and you should be willing to spend $100, quote unquote, extra to fly at a reasonable hour. But really, it's not extra. That's like what it's supposed to cost. When you fly at 6 a.m., that's like a discount ticket. So fly at a normal hour, pay what it costs, be productive, and hopefully this video inspired you and maybe gave you a different perspective that I really haven't seen before too much online. But yeah, always fly after 8 a.m. Hope you enjoyed this travel tip with My Latin Life.